Research suggests that profound personal change begins not with inspiration, but with a peculiar form of internal friction. Scientists studying neuroplasticity have discovered that the brain resists transformation until existing neural highways become so congested they can no longer function efficiently. This resistance creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, a mental earthquake that signals the foundation of your current self has begun to crack under pressure that has been building for months, sometimes years. Consider how a building demolition works in urban environments. Engineers don't randomly destroy walls or blast concrete without careful planning. They spend weeks analyzing structural blueprints, identifying load-bearing supports, calculating stress points, and mapping out exactly which elements must fall first to ensure controlled collapse. They identify load-bearing structures and remove them strategically, allowing gravity and physics to do the rest of the work. Your psyche operates using remarkably similar principles and follows the same systematic breakdown patterns. When core beliefs that have supported your identity for decades suddenly feel hollow, brittle, or completely foreign to who you're becoming, the entire framework starts to buckle under its own accumulated weight. These aren't minor adjustments or small tweaks to your thinking. This is foundational restructuring happening at the deepest levels of consciousness. Most individuals interpret this internal demolition as personal failure or psychological breakdown. They assume something has gone terribly wrong when familiar thought patterns begin to feel foreign, uncomfortable, or completely disconnected from their current reality. They panic when the mental habits that once provided comfort now feel restrictive, suffocating, or entirely inappropriate for the challenges they're facing. But neuroscience reveals the opposite truth. Mental architecture must destabilize completely before it can rebuild stronger, more adaptive foundations. The discomfort isn't malfunction. It's renovation happening at the cellular level. Picture an outdated smartphone from 5 years ago trying to run today's most advanced software applications. The device overheats constantly, crashes repeatedly during basic operations, struggles with simple functions that newer models handle effortlessly, and becomes increasingly unreliable under any kind of processing pressure. That obsolete technology perfectly mirrors how your current mindset handles new challenges, opportunities, and growth demands that exceed its original programming. The operating system worked perfectly when it was first installed years ago, but exponential growth and evolving circumstances have completely outpaced its capacity to function effectively. No amount of minor updates, patches, or workarounds can bridge that fundamental gap between current needs and original design. Complete reinstallation becomes not just beneficial, but absolutely inevitable for continued progress. This mental reinstallation process begins with pattern recognition and deep structural analysis. Every limiting belief operates within an interconnected network of supporting thoughts, emotions, and behavioral responses. Take perfectionism as a prime example of this interconnected complexity. That single trait doesn't exist in isolation floating freely in your mind. It connects directly to fear of judgment and criticism, which links seamlessly to avoidance behavior and procrastination, which feeds back into harsh self-criticism and internal punishment, which reinforces and strengthens the original perfectionist impulse in an endless, self-perpetuating cycle. Each element strengthens and validates the others, creating a self-sustaining loop that persists relentlessly, even when it causes tremendous suffering, anxiety, and prevents actual progress toward meaningful goals. These psychological systems become so integrated and automatic that they feel like permanent aspects of personality rather than learned patterns that can be modified or completely replaced. Breaking this deeply entrenched cycle requires understanding its complete architecture and mapping all the connection points. Imagine a spider's web covered in morning dew, each strand glistening and clearly visible in early sunlight. Touch one strand gently, and vibrations ripple through the entire structure, affecting every connected point simultaneously. Your psychological patterns work identically to this delicate but resilient web system. Challenge one belief and related thoughts begin to wobble uncertainly. Question a single fundamental assumption, and the whole framework starts to sway precariously. But here's where the process gets particularly fascinating and counterintuitive. The web doesn't collapse quietly or gradually. As connections weaken and lose their structural integrity, the remaining strands pull tighter and create more tension than existed before the disruption began. This explains precisely why personal growth often feels significantly more difficult initially rather than easier. Your psyche isn't regressing or moving backward. It's reorganizing under tremendous pressure while maintaining basic functionality. Consider how forests regenerate after devastating wildfires sweep through entire ecosystems. The destruction appears absolutely catastrophic from any external perspective, leaving behind charred landscapes that seem lifeless and permanently damaged. But experienced ecologists know that certain seed varieties only germinate when exposed to extreme heat and specific chemical changes that occur during intense burning. the fire doesn't actually destroy the ecosystem's potential. It clears accumulated debris and creates optimal conditions for dormant potential to emerge. Some plant species actually depend entirely on periodic burning cycles to thrive and reproduce successfully. Your internal psychological landscape follows remarkably similar regenerative principles. Comfortable patterns and familiar mental habits must burn away completely before truly adaptive ones can take root in the cleared space. The burning sensation feels intense and sometimes overwhelming because familiar mental structures are actively dissolving, leaving you temporarily without the psychological landmarks you've relied upon for navigation, decision-making, and basic identity maintenance. During this dissolution phase, many people experience what researchers specifically call identity diffusion, a profound sense that core aspects of self have become fluid, uncertain, and completely unreliable. Who are you without the consistent story you've been telling yourself for years or decades? What remains solid when the roles you've played no longer fit your expanding sense of possibility? This intensive questioning isn't crisis or pathology. It's clearing and preparation for reconstruction. Think carefully about how professional construction crews prepare any building site. Before laying new foundations that will support lasting structures, they must excavate old concrete completely, remove accumulated debris and contamination, test soil stability and composition, and ensure proper drainage and support systems are in place. The construction lot looks significantly worse before it looks better, often resembling a disaster zone rather than future development. Similarly, psychological reconstruction requires methodically clearing mental debris that accumulated over years of unconscious conditioning, social programming, and automatic response patterns. The excavation process rarely feels peaceful, organized, or under control. Old fears may surge with unexpected intensity and frequency, as if sensing their complete elimination is imminent and fighting desperately for survival. Familiar doubts might scream louder than ever before, desperately trying to maintain their historical influence over decision-making and self-perception. This dramatic amplification isn't evidence of setback or regression. It's definitive proof that change has reached critical mass and breakthrough is imminent. Imagine a massive dam that has been holding back accumulated water pressure for decades of steady buildup. When structural cracks finally appear in the concrete, pressure builds dramatically and dangerously before the structure finally gives way completely. That mounting pressure parallels exactly what happens when outdated self-concepts begin to fail under the weight of new experiences and expanded awareness. the intensity signals that breakthrough is imminent, not that breakdown or failure is occurring. After the dramatic release comes the most delicate and crucial phase: systematic reconstruction. New neural pathways form gradually and organically, like rivers carving fresh channels through sediment over geological time periods. These emerging thought patterns feel unfamiliar and fragile initially, requiring conscious attention and deliberate reinforcement. You might catch yourself thinking differently about familiar situations, responding with unexpected calm during previously triggering circumstances, or making choices that genuinely surprise you with their wisdom and clarity. This reconstruction doesn't happen through force, willpower, or aggressive mental discipline. It emerges naturally through consistent repetition and patient cultivation, like water slowly wearing new grooves in stone through persistent flow over time. Each time you consciously choose trust over automatic fear responses, clarity over habitual confusion, or decisive action over familiar hesitation, you strengthen the emerging pathway while simultaneously weakening the abandoned route through simple disuse. Recent brain imaging studies conclusively show that this rewiring process continues actively for months after initial change begins, with some neural modifications continuing for years as new patterns become completely automatic. The new version of yourself isn't born overnight in a single dramatic transformation. It develops gradually through countless micro-decisions that progressively shift your default responses, automatic reactions, and unconscious behavioral patterns. Picture a river changing course over seasonal cycles. The new channel starts as a barely noticeable stream, hardly visible beside the established waterway that has carved deep banks over decades. But seasonal floods and persistent flow gradually widen the alternative route, carrying more water each year until it becomes the primary passage for all downstream flow. The old riverbed doesn't disappear immediately or dramatically. It dries slowly over multiple seasons, leaving only faint traces and occasional pools where water once flowed consistently. Your psychological transformation follows this exact same natural timeline and progression pattern. New mental patterns start small and almost imperceptible, but gain tremendous momentum through consistent reinforcement and repeated successful use. Meanwhile, abandoned thought patterns fade gradually through simple disuse, becoming increasingly difficult to access even when you consciously try to revert to familiar territory during moments of stress or uncertainty. This gradual process explains perfectly why lasting change feels both revolutionary and completely natural simultaneously. Revolutionary because the shift is profound and affects every area of life and decision-making. Natural because it aligns with your authentic capacity and potential, rather than fighting against your basic nature or forcing artificial modifications that create internal conflict. Now I'll pause briefly to acknowledge what naturally happens when transformative content like this resonates deeply with someone ready for change. If these insights feel personally relevant and timely, supporting creators who consistently share transformative perspectives helps ensure such meaningful conversations continue reaching people at exactly the right moment in their development. Consider subscribing not just as another number in the algorithm, but as a clear signal that meaningful dialogue about growth and consciousness deserves amplification in our increasingly superficial digital world. The remarkable truth that emerges from understanding this process is that what feels like personal dissolution is actually personal evolution happening at the deepest possible level. The discomfort you're experiencing isn't your downfall or evidence of failure. It's your complete upgrade, installing new operating systems for expanded capacity and enhanced functionality. If this message finds you during a period of internal turbulence, uncertainty, or fundamental questioning, understand clearly that turbulence always precedes breakthrough in natural systems. The pressure building within your consciousness isn't trying to destroy or diminish you. It's preparing to launch you toward possibilities and potentials that your former self couldn't even perceive or imagine. To anchor this moment of recognition and create a lasting marker of where your conscious transformation began, share in the comments one word that captures your current state of change. Let that word serve as a bookmark for when you look back months from now at where this particular journey of conscious evolution first began.